Okay, I'm going to just get a real quick look at the lighting and the sound level with the way it is in here, and make sure it's good to go or whatever it needs to be. Yeah, so I was kind of looking at some of the information and thinking about the you know preliminary prejudice of product registration of birth certificate, and the thing about my thought of the front lines of the beach right involving the carbon footprint, and most of the major as far as I know, I've only been on three major interviews with manufacturers that have importing and exporting worldwide in the Houston area, out off the northwest Highway 290, Highway 6 area out there. And I've been on three interviews, okay, but only two of them presented the information of the carbon footprint, and the way it's all presented during the interview. I mean, anyone that's been to a Christian church wouldn't really recognize the thing about the front lines of the beachfront and the plaque and the symbolic, eventually the symbolic schematic fish of like I mentioned several times before, involving the principle of McDonald's golden arches being two half cycles above what would be the axis of measuring cycles per second in oscillation, and the center line being the axis, okay, the horizontal plane of the axis of measuring cycles per second in oscillation. But the thing about degree level reference standards of consensual participation in the way of McDonald's golden arches presenting both half cycles above visually, yet in meaning, the gold thing about the price of gold going up and down in that way still represents the half a cycle above and half a cycle below. What that is to the equator, or what that is, above or below par, or above or below sea level, or the thing about all that information. In any case, so I was thinking about that because the carbon footprint had been presented that way of, and it ultimately gets to the thing about in my mind, of preliminary prejudice, a product registration of a birth certificate, and how confetti and graffiti seem to be the thing about information in the way of that fact of I mean, if that's some idea of a celebration or somewhere in between business and corporate law, or the elastic store, and what that is in the mayor's office as far as proclamations and declarations, or some idea of importing and exporting, having the thought of what international law dictates is an easement of an intellectual property that produces royalties for the duration of the lifespan of the intellectual property. That's the memory of the content being presented in that way. In any case, so it presented that information as the front lines of the beach, right? Had three interviews out off Highway 290, and so only two of them presented the information that would give the presentation of the carbon footprint, and carbon being purple and 88 and all that stuff about it. In any case, so it had got to the thought of once again the thing about the Christian principle of the front lines of the beach, right? Not limited to even the burial determinant, and the thing about the spelling and pronunciation of the determinant being the DE being the I-9, the ninth letter, yet pronounced EYE in 35, and what that is to Austin and NASA and Dodge in that way. And I think it's Dodge Charger is the only one that used the double forward slash as part of its design. I think it's a Charger. For how many years, I'm not sure. Anyway, yeah. So so I mean, if the double forward slash of Dodge and NASA and memory minus tobacco equate to 35 in that way, I mean, if it's ultimately getting to the thought of interviews in that way, of that information being provided, if the double forward slash really represents some idea in that way of memory minus tobacco of what importing and exporting is, where the real interview is about the carbon footprint. Anyone who's known anyone that's probably seen that plaque with the footprints on the beachfront, and there's two people showing the four sets of feet being two people, and then like only one set of footprints. The question, Lord, where were you when I need you most? And that's when he replied, saying, that's when I was carrying you. Likewise with the military burial determinant, seemed to be, that's where the mind's eye seemed to be, of where, the thing about before it is written, certain factors about, what the carbon footprint is, to the carrying thing about it, and where that's at, and the now thing, okay. But in any case, yeah, so like I was think about that with the McDonald's Golden Arch in the way of like a degree level of reputable science constitutional participation that way, and half a cycle above and half a cycle below, measuring frequency, measuring secondary frequency in like oscillation. Okay, the thing with this is that in electronics, it presents the principle of in the now thing, like two half cycles above being side by side in one sense and perception, yet the half cycle above and below being like side by side would almost be the equating factor of like an alignment in the parallel universe, and be like the electronic fish, a symbolic representation that many Christians actually represent some idea like of the fish. How true it is about the Sea of Galilee and the 5 fish and the 5 loaves of bread. I have to actually think about that, but as far as like the Calamity Jane and swimming upstream, being the thing about the clam and the pearl, that's all that information, okay, and it seems to be it ultimately gets to the Statue of Liberty and the five I don't want to call it spike, but the 7 pylon looking cone Statue of Liberty, the 7-point crown of the Statue of Liberty, and like the thing about behavior, or the thought of like sojourning through the wilderness, kind of like factor of like what it would take to maintain some level of consistency of going beyond the bewildered into the civilized thing about it, and how Native American Indian represents the behavior that way, or the idea of like a reserve or preservation, or ultimately getting to the aggregates and all that stuff. Well, in any case, so like I was thinking about that because of the front lines of the beachfront and the misappropriation of the allocation of the Mississippi, and because of the fish, predominantly salmon, swimming upstream in the ladder and all that stuff about it. And I was thinking about the political science thing about all the graffiti and confetti, like dropping down from like political conventions in that way. It had openly got to the thought of like, and I want to say this real quick and get back to where I was going. Moby in the Houston area is like a radio disc jockey of the rock station, KLOL 101.1 FM Christian, rock radio, and then moved to 97 rock, okay. And the thing about the Moby, okay, is that his thing was like talking about Python, although it's pronounced what he was referring to Python as some idea like pet management, some idea of Python in the way of like being bewildered, taming and civilizing Python as compared to like the word relation between architecture and platform, and how Python and architecture and platform as compared to the thought of embedded encryption and what the deal is about that. Well, Moby, okay, he actually went to 97 Rock, okay, and he used to do a lot of simulcasts on the beach, okay. The thing with this is that he'd refer to like something about assume the position, and it seemed to be like now, and it's probably all the way back in the 80s when he had moved to 97 Rock, and the thing about in my mind now, like the Chevrolet Camaro IROC Z28 now from American 213, likewise Los Angeles and LA being like linguistic alphanumerics, yet at the same time it seemed to be the Abraham Lincoln night vision of the rectangle of not limited to the tennis court, but Lincoln Continental, in a way what continental and globalization are predominantly the two words of like international financial management that that identify the thing about ultimately getting to Abraham Lincoln night vision and what the deal is between American history, with some idea of like Lincoln being like rearranged, being kennel, or in computer programming involving the kernel, and the R being like a principle of the P, and rearranged, and the thing about the kennel or the pi r squared, the E equal MC squared that way of like shadow government and like even the symbolic representation of a Diners Club. And the thing about Diners Club is the thing about quantum getting. In my mind, it's like the Japanese thing. It seemed like the alphabetics of Houston area in Pearland being the Z71 and what Japanese is, the orientation in that way. And only two symbols of like the quantum going beyond the different design E that calculus uses with absolute and how they go through like different ways, on into quantum and how quantum has the structure as far as formulative computation. There's the structure as compared to just the formulative computation. The formula in like calculus doesn't really have the structure. I mean, like at all that quantum does in that way. And I was looking at it, okay, and, briefly, my first thought was like, hey, that looks like Japanese, and I think there's only two of them, and I think it very well may be the actual two of the letters of the Japanese alphabet identified only to the available information that I know of, representing some idea of the 2 of the 22. And the thing with this is the 2 of the 22 is like almost like the EBT and electronic benefits transfer and the SNAP food benefits in a Lone Star card, yet the EBT presents, the 2 in the way of like a BT being 22 or FBI psychology minus 22 RCA or a car or, thing about the FDIC or, the thing about, ultimately getting to, the Japanese letters and the 2 of the 22 be like the 2, the 20. And think about Diners Club, okay, and a symbolic representation on the backside of the U.S. $1 bill, and the idea of like a, 20 being like the alphanumerics of 107, alphanumerically, likewise Diners Club that way. I get the symbolic representation of Diners Club with a vertical line in the center. It presents the division yet the unity and togetherness of what would seem to be the issue of the reading Japanese from top to bottom, and only two that I noticed, okay, and it looked like the structure so like Japanese is unreal, and in that way. So like in any case, yeah. So like I was thinking about that because likewise, in addition, like the misappropriation of the allocation of the Mississippi, okay, being like the ISS and the SSI and the PPI, and it seemed to be the deal about the in political science at conventions, when the confetti, the confetti and graffiti, it's like some idea of like celebration in a political science convention. The thing with this is that they refer to the Iowa caucus, and my thing about Iowa is like Newbags, Iowa, and what Abraham Lincoln night vision is to a black hole space exploration, and color code, and like what's going on like now on the toilet, okay. To boldly go where no man has gone before, yeah. So like space, the final frontier to a journey through both space and time. To boldly go where no man has gone before, yeah. So it's like the black hole space exploration on toilet. Then wise one, yeah. Sacred words call upon you, wise one. Go to the rising canyon where many moons fly, and you will find a sign. Then go to the running waters, yeah. Yeah, after the Newbags, Iowa, and like Abraham Lincoln night vision, besides the meaning, of getting, then go to the running waters thing, yeah. And it doesn't have to be the royal flush, but anyway, yeah, it seems to be the thing about it. But yeah, so like I was thinking about that because of the misappropriation of allocation of the Mississippi being the ISS, like a International Space Station or International Superstar or International Secret Service, as well as the Supplemental Security Income, or this, Superstar like intelligence and all that good stuff. Well, in any case, yeah, so like it presents the ISS and the SSI and the PPI of the Mississippi, and when a river is like a driver. Okay, my driver's license has 2 D's on it, okay? My first thought of about, the D is like the number 4, the fourth letter being D, or FBI minus CIA, automatic is like 4, okay? And here recently, think about just Pearland, knowing, something about, Pearland and the Acura thing about Legends Cafeteria, or, thing about the Acura being like 44, or the UNI being 44, like a Univision. And other factors are like the word hidden, sometimes inadvertently suggesting, a thought of like an earnest placement of like what is involved with like escrow, and that seems to be the thing about whether or not if um, the Apple iPhone SE being the SE being the thing about Alchemist 24 and the HOA Homeowners Association and GMAC of promissory notes and the IEEE being all 24 and ultimately some conversion in my mind thinking that going beyond like a method of banking involving any kind of checking account or any check at all and going completely electronic would be the thought of the 240 volts of living quarters, commercial venue living quarters that seem to be not affected by in any kind of way television programming. Likewise, the EBT on supplemental security being presented and introduced because of Social Security Administration and benefits that way of like supplemental security income, ultimately leading to Medicaid. Has presented all the information that's like available and similarities of a student loan and Ulysses S. Grant as compared to litigation and tobacco and res habeas corpus. And it seems to be somewhere in my mind that it seems to be some idea of like a medical power of attorney using a fixture in real estate, such as like redundant frequency or the squelch or the thought of like if the television's on or off or some idea of what a deed restriction might not be perceived at by many. Identifying, the idea of like immigration's customs enforcement, or a method of banking in a way of like even identifying, a driver's license beginning with a 0 as compared to a 1, or what that is to the equator and the operator, and all the alphanumerics of like 0 being 64 and ACPP : // or the operator being 0 yet operator is 108 like Chevrolet and Bicentennial, and all that information, involving all the alphanumerics that way. And making great beyond internet protocol, local area network of maritime law seems to be the big deal about some idea of the misappropriation involving the equator, or what a 90 degrees seems to be the ultimate deal between what that is to the fish or salmon swimming upstream, or the idea of the triangle being identified as the delta of the biggest mouth of the river. Yet electronics it defines the meaning of schematic symbolic representation in the form of like the triangle that way, and how the pyramid in Egypt and Harris and the Houston, Texas area, and alphanumerics 181, and some idea like between like Caroline, Texas being 140, alphanumerics and attenuation and the UA. Okay, here's the thing about attenuation. Okay, it's like the attention when UA is the two letters taken out of attenuation. I mean, it's like 22. Okay, UA is like U is 21 and A is 1. It's like 22. Okay. And there's all this information getting like with supplemental security income involving even SNAP food benefits or the Lone Star car and the EBT. The EBT card is actually a card as a direct source, and whether it was actually made available and it really being the real direct source, but the card was most definitely not involving in any kind of way a checking account or a bank account. Yeah, so I mean getting it out has not like really been really like not a cool experience developing the meeting requirements of the vocabulary kind of like conversation and trying to maintain some like idea of like mannerism. Okay, but in any case, so like so like all that's going on, and the thing about the word of attenuation is like the digital signal processing speed of like waveform, yet attenuation and the absolute thing about quantum and making it great beyond calculus. And calculus being like 92, or like the Pentagon, or the color yellow, or what that is, getting beyond myself, and like having like a 90 degree, the equator, and some idea of point of origin. I mean, if military time is really going to be the deal, or if I would even know the difference of a Stargate program, and only the memory, what seemed to me, like a 25, 30, maybe even 35-year period of like realizing, certain factors about the memory. Was not even the issue when really was really that the entire time, and didn't recognize that much about it. And it was like a 25, 30 going on, close to more towards, 35 years and realizing certain factors. And what really started it was like Barbara Walters, the memory like Barbara Walters and Hugh Downs on 2020. And what 2020 is, that way of like normal, perfect, 2020 vision. With the idea of like a panoramic 180 degree panoramic academia with like some idea of like a peripheral tolerance of like the motion of the eye itself would probably be maybe even the thought of maybe I have to think about if it's going to be really like 22.5, as like looking from left as a peripheral, as, like a tunnel vision straight ahead and to the left. I mean, I don't know if that's actually 22.5, like in my mind, the double forward slash is to, the double forward slash of HTTP on double forward slash. If it's like that galaxy, I have to really think about it, and if that's like part of the peripheral tolerance of like vision itself. But Univision, okay, the UNI is like 44, okay, and I'd ask the question because previously on my Texas driver's license, I did not have DD on it, but it seemed to be a combination of when that started being placed on my driver's license. I'd call it and say, hey, what's the DD number? And now it seems to be, the idea of like, and I'd ask the question, several times, is that where it goes with the misappropriation allocation of Mississippi, of the ISS and the SSI, and now what's being presented, with my supplemental security income benefits that predominantly Medicaid and like AmeriGroup has like went to WellPoint. It's WellPoint's identified as Medicare, okay, and predominantly SSDI is the thing about Medicare, and a different type, and the thing with this is that SSDI as compared to SSI presents the issue of like some idea if retroactive history is not the issue of history at all, but maybe a future in a way different. Now that was like not necessarily that anything other than maybe the thought of what a credit or a tax deduction is or is not, as compared to what the IRA of like the word annuity with just that one word associated with like an IRA, or all the thought of like classified ads and a bunch of applications of like interviews normally of like employment, and normally the IRA is suggesting some idea of like managing factors. I mean, just by checking the box, whether it's even a known or not known fact. I mean, ultimately, it's the thought of like prepaid tax of normally, the thought of employment. I mean, and normally that's normally on an annual basis of, whether it's on a 1040 EZ and or the Schedule A and B, the 1040. The thing with this is that really, ultimately, the benefits of Medicare presenting, WellPoint now, and like on my account with like a BMC number, you get, like, well, I mean, if that's going to present the issue of like whether or not the the ERISA statute. I mean, it's an acronym. The difference between the ERISA, ERISA, and the IRA is like the IRA, and the SE, and like iPhone SE. I mean, it's like the C, the 24 thing about it, and it ultimately gets to the thought of like 24 and even a redundant frequency. And I never thought of the squelch as like an absolute zero. And the thing with this is that a redundant frequency, presenting itself as like some idea of the figure 8 and iScapades, or what that is to the zoom lens based upon a 9-degree placement on the zoom lens, and using the stars that way, like perfect 10-10 vision that way, of like exponential quotients, powers, and multiplication, just with the optics and everything involved, like I mean the planetarium and that kind of power that way of vision, not limited to. But the thing with this is likewise, in addition, think about the word empire, and like pi r squared, and empire, pi r squared. It's like the E equal MC squared and the pi r squared at the same time. Yet in placement in that way, I mean, it seems to be identifying the embassy of states, the high-rise towers of power, normally associated with some idea of like comptrollers, and treasury departments, and certain factors of where that's at and which building, and the street name, and all that stuff about predominantly all towers of powers, and whether it's going to be the idea of like a corporate entity as like an eternal structure, or maybe the thought between maybe what Cisco might not ever really identify some idea between like public and private as like the thought of communications as far as like an MP3 audible sound of communications like Cisco presents. That's a symbolic representation on the telecommunications being like telephone, the alphanumerics of 100, okay, being like that, as well as like the number 30 being spelled out as like the alphanumerics of 100, between a telephone a hospital and, the thought of like a Vantage Love 30 or a Secret de facto 30, it presents, some idea like the symbolic representation of what looks like a bunch of lines looking like kind of like a cycle, a half above and below, using the different lengths of poles. Yet the thing of it is that it ultimately leads to the thought of like, Cisco presents the idea of communications, of networking. Not only like, it's like almost the difference between, GIT being geospatial information technology, and that one book of GIT being 36, or, Chaser Oil, and what the deal is about geospatial information technology and the GIT in that way, or the, get smart, get Maxwell smart. Agent 99 thing about, even the thought of like the alphanumerics of the number 13 being 99, or, Chevy Chase. The thing is that, the 1992 presidential inaugural ball of William Jefferson Clinton and like Al Gore, and, Chevy Chase actually, hosting, and those are his own words that he chose, was the word host. And I don't know if that's going to be, the thing about the, yeah. In any case, yeah, so like, he was like hosting the 1992 presidential inaugural ball, and, his name is like on the map in Washington, D.C., predominantly, associated with like Department of Education, on geographically attached on the map, and normally like more so of like, Education, Department of Education, geographically and in the immediate area, about that much about geographic in the United States Department of like Education, okay, at Chevy Chase Boulevard in Washington, D.C. But in any case, yeah, so like thinking about, today's Chevrolet and all that stuff about Chevrolet Silverado and all that stuff. Well, anyway, getting back to the misappropriation allocation of Mississippi, and like the PPO and the PPI, like the Mississippi, like the significant difference between, being on par as the idea of like whether the jet stream is going to be some idea of like the schematic fish and Calamity Jane and prepaid postage in a way of like the horseshoe representing some idea of ohms in that way. And ohms predominantly, it's normally of 8 ohms, normally the most powerful speaker for like live performance and concerts. 8 ohms is also the thought of like, a schematic symbol representing, like a horseshoe. And a little bit of humor, how to warm a horseshoe through the ice capades. And the thing about, getting beyond, like the liquid equity of like maritime law, internet protocol of local area network seems to be the deal about, going beyond what would be maybe, the wide area thing about like a local area network, making it grade beyond some thought of maritime law that way, and getting, at least to the thought of, maybe even beyond, the on par Holy Land, province and color code that way, the pastel being 73 in like Harris and Egypt, and the thing about Israel being 64 and Israeli with the I on it, it's like 73, and all that, connectivity between 64 and 73 in Harris, and in America, and the thing about the, HTTP colon double forward slash, and in America and in Israel, and 73 Harris and Egypt, and like the Israeli flag, and absolute code blue, like the, the biggest mouth of the river being like schematic electronic symbol, yeah, of the triangle, and some idea of pi squared it being a 6-point star, and what that horizontal absolutes of like code blue of like the Israeli flag represent in my mind, of like even quantum of like customizing waveform, having the parameters above and below, what would be in the center of like measuring cycles per second of oscillation as an axis, as a center line. It's only the outer, upper, and lower, normally post-production, but the one thing of the one and only, I've heard the word perpendicular quite a bit at different locations, but it's like at Commandos, I only saw it one time. It's like live production. I didn't know what I was looking at, okay, but it's like a vertical that presents the transparent parameters vertically. What is like a post-production of like customizing waveform of like audio production, and quantum is involved that way, of attenuation, as compared to, just measuring cycles per second, oscillation and frequency, and the difference between a 13-band graphic equalizer, only changing, bandwidth and spectrum, speeding up and slowing down, oscillation, and it changes the pitch and tone of frequency of chosen spectrum and bandwidth, and that's really, really predominantly all, a 13-band graphic equalizer does. Well, it just happens to be, the 13-band graphic equalizer. It presents, the night vision in a way like pastel green and pastel red, measured in like nanoluminous. Um, and you know what that is? You know, really ultimately it's kind of like the Colorado Club in the Houston area or Chevrolet Colorado that way. And it's kind of like, you know, the Oracle Corporation, ultimately, you know, the Robin Williams and Pam Dauber thing. And, you know, the thing about even Line 6 B series and the Shots About 909 thing about, in my mind, the seventh heaven of like a Line 6 B series, like guitar combo amp. And the thing about, you know, Pearl Vision, VSX, my thing about the ISS mounting system, yet it's still the acronym. And the thing about, you know, my drum set being like, you know, a double bass with like two mounted toms being a total of six, or the thought of like, you know, pi r squared or E equal MC squared, and all that stuff about, you know, a hypothetical metaphor, the way the toms are mounted to the basses that way, and a whole new perception. And the thing with this is that the Pearl Vision VSX, I have a Strata Red right now, but I've only got one of the Strata Blue, and it's a 12-inch tom, and I'm working on getting the entire set. And you'll see me on my YouTube.com channel at Wade ASD Pretty. That's WADE ASD PRIDDY at YouTube.com, and you'll see what you're seeing right now with a bunch of lasers on me and behind me, and some of the lasers that are in some of my videos. Likewise, you know, with fog and 3D animation. Likewise, in addition to special effects lighting and strobes, and what you're seeing now is like kind of like a sequence automation of like only one, of like a multiple, you know, sequence and automation, and whether if it's going to be a sound activated, you know, option or not. I mean, but what you're looking at right there is just a sequence and automation of just one chosen, and that's all that is right there. It's like one of the better ones that I have. In any case, yeah. So like me on the drums and it's on a Pearl Vision VSX Strata Red with the black hardware. That's like 15 drums, including like 3 rotor toms and 4 octobans, and like 7 cymbals and a tambourine hi-hat, and, you know, cowbell, and, you know, some special effect chime, and, you know, and a special effect bell, and all that stuff. So like I'm looking to get that with my a Pearl Vision in a Strata Blue, and that's really what I'm working on now. But, you know, things hadn't really quite. I had quite a bit of equipment for like a recording studio, okay, and like really some real not cool issues with like really, and like I'm sitting now in my own home, okay, because of some conditions of, you know, some idea of like, you know, all terrain interior design, and that's led to some EPA standards, and yeah, so like really that really is my thought of like not extremely cool at all about even having to be in there, but you know, hey, it's like, hey, 10 is like 59, and Highway 59 is like, hey, it's 140 parallel sections. Yeah, all right, like I got some Alpha American insinuation going on about some biblical reference beyond, you know, the desert, and some idea of like Sarah and Joseph and Abraham and even Jacob's ladder. Yeah. So like anyway, so like I was kind of like thinking about that because Chase Practicum and Chase Practicum Joseph, it's like the difference between the alphanumerics of a 213 Chase Practicum Joseph, and think about Chase Practicum being the alphanumerics of 140 in parallel sections, or alphanumerics or attenuation, and, you know, it goes on and on that way. But anyway, yeah. So like I want to get back on the misappropriation allocation of the Mississippi, the ISS and the SSI, and the DD is presenting, you know, is that where it goes? Is it the Univision? Is it the Pearl Vision? You know, or is it the Barbara Walters 2020? And I think it's got like really all of it, because Barbara Walters had the also, in addition, the television series of View, and here recently, you know, there was like a 16-month period of having to go to the hospital because of conditions like part of the reason why I'm actually in a tent right now, and some idea that a combination of stuff. But anyway, it was only the 15th month, okay, and some idea of like an invisible laser, like way back when I was age of 15, and ultimately, you know, like what's, you know, who's in my mailbox kind of like thing, and, you know, didn't even talk about it. But the thing about Mercedes Benz and SUVs, like in front of me, behind me, beside me, like oncoming traffic, I mean, and really, it's really only because probably, likewise at the age of 15, the picture on the Padres, or, you know, what now seems to be some idea of like the addresses at CBS or State of the Union address that presents some idea of like the alphanumerics of like 192 in one word, and Book of Thessalonians being the Transfiguration, and alphanumerics of 192, and all the way to the American Amplified thing about, you know, amplification on the home theater that was not really during the hi-fis. I'm sure that was available, but it wasn't identified in any case. I mean, if it's only the issue between solid state being identified as compared to like the home theater, showing the amplification. And I think there's some conversion of like, I think 192 mega kilohertz. And it's the difference between a 3-letter acronym and a 4-letter acronym. And I think I've seen that like on Cadillac and Lincoln, both as MKZ and MK8Z. And through Pearland for a while, I mean, the Z71